Hello, this is Tim Law with Planet Forward Coaching, always encouraging your self-reliance. If you develop a marketable skill, chase that skill with a good work ethic, always go the extra mile, develop some people and communication skills. You'll be amazed on what you can accomplish in this country. A big thank you to over 500 people who have subscribed to this channel, Planet Forward Coaching. If you haven't already, please do so. I'd super appreciate it. I have a guy here that I got to know just a couple years ago, 2 years ago in February, who is really very much on the cutting edge of the impact of the smartphones, the screens, and that type of thing on teens, young adults, etc. My good friend Tom Kersting, who's been on a lot of the national shows and everything. So Tom, welcome and fire away.
All right, thanks, Tim. Appreciate it. Yeah, so yeah, like you said, we've met several years ago and have hit it off, and I've been on here a couple times, just trying to do my part to get out there and help parents and kids and society, basically.
Sure. And as a clinical psychologist, Tom, what is it that, kind of tell that story on what you were seeing, I think from 2010 on. I may be off a little bit on the dates, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm a psychotherapist. So, I used to work at a high school. I did 25 years as a school counselor, and I was doing both the private practice and the school. And I retired 2 years ago, young from the high school. But it was really back then, around 2009, actually, when started getting all these kids with attention deficit disorder into one of our committees. And it was just, I talk about it in the book, and it just wasn't adding up. And I came across some compelling research, that showed that a lot of the symptoms of ADHD aren't actually ADHD. It's from the brain being so stimulated by technology. That's how I got into the space, started lecturing back then, wrote the book, the popular book, Disconnected: How to Protect Your Kids from the Harmful Effects of Device Dependency. And now I'm on, I'm back out there speaking, and I have my next book coming out with the publisher next February, but been working on that for like the last year.
Yeah, and what's the new book, Tom? What's going to be the title of it, or if you can say it or not?
Yeah. So the title, the publisher has the title. The title is Raising Healthy Teenagers.
Great.
Equipping your child to navigate the pitfalls and dangers of teen life. So it really goes into everything that kids are facing nowadays, really, not just, especially, since COVID came about, a lot of things really exacerbated. So not just technology, but overall, the overarching issues that kids are facing, just social skills issues, communication issues starting at young ages because they're not outside much. There's more screen time than there is green time. And I even go into, this pressure for college admissions and the student loan deficit that kids are facing and so forth. So it's really like, it's almost like our children today, it's just one epidemic after the next. And sure. I'm trying to really just, it's really to help parents, kind of not get caught up, in the whole, everything going on outside in society, and really raise your kids from a wholesome, deeper spiritual level, basically.
And Tom, what are some of the strategies, whether it's for schools looking to try to take control of these things a little bit? What strategies do you have for schools? And then also, as far as parents are concerned, what are some of the best practices that you believe are out there that you've come across?
Yeah, so some of the things that, and I've spoken to so many schools all over the country, and and I'm going to just be point blank, and I talk about this in Disconnected, is I don't think phones should be permitted in schools at all. I mean, we probably talked about this in the past, but one of the issues with that, it's easier said than done. I did have a principal at one particular school, I forget where it was, maybe Washington, that they actually put in a policy that phones were not allowed to enter the building. The problem that school administrators are going to face with that is really coming from the parents, because parents, it's sort of become the lifeline, the umbilical cord to know everything going on with their child. What if there's an emergency? But it's really unhealthy, and it kind of sends a message to kids that this world is so dangerous, and it's not really that dangerous. It's just that everything that happens is now funneled right down to social media, where 20 years ago we wouldn't know about these things, but now right to your phone, boom, if there's a mugging or whatever. So we're kind of in this, living in this mental whirlwind where everything's dangerous, and I think it's creating and triggering a lot of the anxiety that we're seeing in kids today. So as far as schools are concerned, Tim, to answer that question, I would love to see them just say no phones allowed in the school. It's a distraction for the teachers, for the kids. It affects them academically. But then again, like I said, easier said than done.
Sure. What's your view on having the phone caddies, on the wall or on the door or whatever, and kids put them in there at the very least when they, come into the classroom. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's the second best approach, honestly, in terms of, number one being just getting rid of them entirely. But yeah, I think that's a practice that, more and more teachers are using,
Mhm.
place the phone in that caddy, that shoe bag looking thing. And, this way the kids can, can really, focus and concentrate more in school. The other issue is that what I've seen is that, teachers are now utilizing the phone because everyone has one,
Mhm.
for academic reasons. And, it's just, you go into a cafeteria, like I said, I worked in a high school, and kids are sitting there at the tables just on their phones or their computers. And it's like, that's not humanly inherent. They need to
Mhm.
be, talking, socializing, laughing, going out in the courtyard or whatever it might be. That's how we're, what human beings are wired socially and emotionally.
Sure, sure. Well, and also the idea that we came through the eons and eons of generations of people doing, being outside, doing a lot of the things that you discussed. So the idea that this is not healthy as far as overuse of these things, as far as the child's brain or teenager's brain.
Yeah, and even when you look at younger children, because kids nowadays, I did a lecture nearby where I live for a whole bunch of them for middle school kids and then elementary age school kids. And they're in elementary school, they're seeing the problem with phones. So kids
Mhm.
in the average age, last I looked, was like 10 years old. I think it's less than that now. But the
Wow.
problem there is that during those elementary school years, the critical developmental milestones, communication skills, social skills, emotional intelligence, and emotional regulation, those are human skills that are learned on the playground. They're
Mhm.
learned from scraping your knee. They're learned when a kid takes the toy in kindergarten. Those are all human things that are so important for development. But when our kids are just hypnotized by a device at a young age, those skills are now stunted, and it
Mhm.
carries through to middle school, high school, and adulthood. That's my biggest concern.
Sure, sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. And reading, I've gone through your book Disconnected a couple times. And can you tell us a little bit about as far as what you've seen as far as depression, among kids?
Yeah. So so depression, if you look at statistics since 2012, all right, depression and the suicide rate and anxiety, additionally, but particularly the suicide rate, which was always related to depression, has skyrocketed.
Hmm.
And 2012 is when smartphones became mainstream,
Hmm.
right? So, when you look at it, like we have a mental health epidemic among our youth in our society. And it's
Sure.
part of everything I mentioned earlier, those important human characteristics that we develop, communication, emotional regulation. And it's also just being lost for 8 or 9 hours a day in this superficial world,
Hmm.
where there's fear, there's doubt, and all these other things, and is comparing oneself to others. And most important of all, there's no downtime, there's no reflection.
Hmm.
The deeper I tell patients of mine and when I'm doing lectures that, the world as we believe it to be out here, we believe this is reality out here. That is the tip of the iceberg. The
Hmm.
rest of the iceberg is inside. And the only way to understand the meaning of inside, internal, where our joy and happiness evolve from, the only way to understand that is to go there. And you're not going to find that really any kids that do that or understand that, or if they did try that, it would be terrifying for them because their subconscious mind is just triggering and diving into what we call stinking thinking. But understanding and, boredom, I talk about, Tim, in the book, I call it the miracle grow for the mind and emotions. Boredom, when we're not distracted, is when we become creative, when we become connected to our emotions, to our spirit, and so forth. So that's really a missing ingredient.
Sure, sure. Well, and you being a longtime clinical psychologist, I'm not just talking to some guy on the street giving his opinion. I mean, you've done, tons and tons of research. You've talked to, numerous colleagues throughout the country and the world. I mean, you truly are an expert on the, what makes kids, teens, and adults tick and everything. I mean, you've immersed yourself in it for, decades. So you're certainly have a great understanding, much more than the average person.
Yeah. And when I'm speaking to kids, I get to a section on self-esteem, right?
Mhm.
And I'll grab some kid in the front row and I'll say, all right, I have a question for you. Who are you? And I already know what the answer is going to be because it's the same answer every time. I'll say, who are you?
Mhm.
And the kid will say, oh, well, I'm Jimmy Smith. And I'll go to the next kid. I'll say, who are you? And he'll say, well, I'm Bobby Jones, et cetera, et cetera. And I do that for about 3 or 4 kids. And then I'll ask them, I'll say to the kid, I'll say, all right, now ask me who I am. And he'll say, well, who are you? And I will say, I'm not Tom Kersting. That's just what my parents named me. Who I am is much deeper than that. What I am is a motivated, determined, powerful, loving, caring lover of life. And that's what everyone is. And I'll go on to speak to the whole crowd and say, that's what everyone in this room is.
Mhm.
But the only way to know that is by going inward, which is hence when you hear the word self-esteem, it's not how others think of me or how many likes I have or how many streaks and followers I have. It starts with the word self. And it's what I think of me. And the only way to know and understand oneself is through repose, by going deep within oneself, closing the eyes for 10 or 15 minutes a day, and feeling the inner goods and using attitude of gratitude. I really try to get kids to understand that because they're living in a very external, in an external way, and that nothing externally can ever fill us up internally. It doesn't work that way. It's the opposite.
Sure. Well, and I've learned over the years of working with teens and young adults for a couple of decades myself, and there's two main ways that we feel good about ourselves: our personal accomplishments and our ability to get along with a wide range of people. Those people skills, everything you've talked about, where they get stunted if they're not being developed. And I don't know how a person could feel fulfilled if they go through 8 or 9 hours on their devices or whatever, and then that day's over and they really haven't accomplished too much.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's really just nothing but a big distraction from life and from self, right? And one of the issues with kids in the new book, I really that's coming out, I dive into this pretty extensively. I'm seeing, a lot of behavioral issues now with kids, like oppositional defiant behavior, like I've never seen before. And when and it seems to always correlate to the phone being taken away, or the video game system being taken away. And the reason for that is these devices and these games and these apps and everything else, that they're designed to target the area of the brain that produces dopamine, which is the feel-good chemical. So, so that there's a balance. So that part of the brain that produces, but dopamine, it's not supposed to be like you're getting this much dopamine 24 hours a day. It's called homeostasis. And through evolution, our brain has learned how to kind of create a balance. But like anything else, and that's the same thing tied to all drugs. If you're getting a nonstop, dose of dopamine, right? And then it's removed, there's a crash, a withdrawal. And that's where we're seeing these major behavioral outbursts, stuff that I wouldn't mention in this, that I see on a regular basis, that I would not mention in this interview.
Sure. And Tom, if somebody wanted to, book you as far as a speaker is concerned, how would they get in touch with you? And I can actually put that at the top of the your contact information once I put this video up. How would they get a hold of you?
They can just email me. That's the best way. And it's my email is tom@tomkersting.com.
Okay, very good. Tom, any other, this has been awesome. Any other thoughts or ideas you'd like to, leave us with here? And can you stick around for a minute or two after we get done here?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So one thing, if you have parents watching right now, is just be, we need to be careful. Like we're a society that's kind of founded on norms. And we tend to do what everybody else around us is doing, right? So as parents, we see kids, all of a sudden everybody's got a phone. Oh, I guess I'll get my kid a phone. My young son's friends all play rated M video games. We got to stick to our standards and not just conform to what everybody else is doing in society. That's how you raise leaders. That's how you raise kids. They'll complain and they're going to get upset. But if you do, give everything that your kid wants because everybody else has it, that's going to lead to a kid that's going to become a follower. We want to make our kids be leaders.
Very well put, Tom. Very well put. Well, look, I really, really appreciate your time, and please give your wife my best as far as Happy Mother's Day, and I appreciate you very much.
Thank you, Tim.
Okay, thanks, Tom.